So we're talking with Maxim Kostetsky, a legal advisor to Transparency International Ukraine. To add that the National Agency for Preventing Corruption deny all the allegations. We'll talk about that later, what quotes we have from them. How would you describe the case? What is important about it?
Good day. Well, first of all, it is important to remember that National Agency for Prevention of Corruption was created in order to actually prevent corruption. And as you already mentioned, in 2015, the launch of this institution was one of the preconditions for the visa-free regime of Ukraine. Unfortunately, since its launch in 2015, the agency did not fulfill its obligations as it was supposed to be. And unfortunately, the people who were in charge of doing the functions that are prescribed to National Agency on preventing corruptions did not fulfill their duties. Well, first of all, it is important to understand that the person who is now becoming a whistleblower comes from an agency that is supposed to protect whistleblowers, which means that it is kind of an irony here. And we need to understand that the person, which is Anna Solomatina, was the first whistleblower from the Anti-Corruption Agency since 2014, and the information she provided is extremely crucial. In order to see whether or not there was criminal wrongdoing in the acts that were done by the head of the NAPC, Ms. Natalia Korchak, the investigation has to be held now, and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine has to investigate what has been done.
We should say that later President Poroshenko's spokesman Sviatoslav Tsegolko wrote on Twitter that the information that this kind of a conflict between two agencies intensified over the last few days and is absolutely unacceptable. And to add something and explain, here at Hromadske, we're definitely following the case. And we approached numbers of agencies, and for a while we're trying to invite the members of the present administration to the studio. As well, we talked to we know that it's way easier to talk to the anti-corruption activists. They are pretty well present in the English-speaking world. There are the people who are speaking against National Agency for Preventing Corruption. We also ask them to speak, but what we know from our sources, their decision is to go to the court and not really be public with the case. But I suggest we now listen to the answer of the National Agency for Preventing Corruption.
The National Agency will soon file a lawsuit in court demanding a retraction of the false information published on November the 14th. We stress that the information disseminated by the ex-official, which did not contain any facts, is a personal attack on the director, members and staff of the National Agency and an attempt to discredit the anti-corruption reform that has successfully started in Ukraine.
Maxim, so why there is so much trust to a whistleblower and there is so much criticism to National Agency for Preventing Corruption as well? Give us the more clear difference between them and your view also on the fight between two agencies, because like from outside it just looks bad. It looks bad from any kind of perspective. So what is your take?
Well, first of all, there is a very strict difference between National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and National Agency for Prevention of Corruption. NABU has been investigating hundreds of criminal cases since it was launched in 2014, and it has proven that the work they are doing in 2016 and in the beginning of 2017 is actually vital, because they are investigating cases against high-ranking officials, they are doing it against the People's Deputies of Ukraine, the members of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. However, the National Agency for Prevention of Corruption, which was supposed to verify hundreds of thousands of electronic declarations made by those officials, did not fulfill their duties. And unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016 they verified only 81 declarations, which means that it's not even 1% of the whole work they are supposed to be doing. Moreover, the head of the National Agency for Prevention of Corruption, Ms. Natalia Korchak, has been subject to political influence from the administration of the president of Ukraine, unfortunately. And as we see from the information we got from the whistleblower, there has been tries and different private meetings where they invited members of the different departments from the national agency to the administration of the president in order to make them do something or in order to stop them from doing something. That is a very, very bad information for the agency as itself, and we see that, of course, only court can verify whether or not this information is true and whether or not there was a criminal wrongdoing here. But however, we see that it is objective information that the national agency did not do their job properly. And if there are crimes that were done by the head of the national agency, of course they should be investigated.
There is sometimes also the criticism towards a national Anti-Corruption Bureau, which is an executive body, which is investigating the cases, as they also could be politically motivated. And in that particular case, I said, we are all in kind of a difficult position because there are anti-corruption activists, some of the known MPs who are really supporting the work of the NABU, but it makes it even more political, the whole process. So as a representative of the international organizations, who also accuse sometimes of being political by some of the people who kind of speak for the government, what is the way out of this situation?
The problem is with the courts because, unfortunately, the majority of the cases submitted by NABU, they just stay delayed in the courts for a couple of months, and some of them, unfortunately, even for a year, which means that the judicial reform is extremely crucial for NABU to be 100% effective. I cannot be 100% sure that there is no political influence on NABU, but for sure NABU is doing their job better than NACP does. And as to what kind of decision we could have in this conflict, unfortunately I think it is important to first of all, as Transparency International, we mentioned that it is important during the investigation of this process, during the investigation of the case that was submitted by the whistleblower, Ms. Natalia Korchak, the head of NAPC, has to be removed from the office at least for the time of this investigation in order to make sure that it's objective and impartial. And in the long run, we need to understand and we need to make legislative changes to the law on preventing corruption in order to make sure that the agency does fulfill their obligations.
On whom it depends? You're addressing something as an organization.
On the lawmakers, of course, because they have to make legislative changes. And as to removing Ms. Natalia Korchak from the office during the time for investigation, it is the duty of the Cabinet of the Ministers. They can do it in order to make sure that the investigation is 100% objective and impartial.
And what in this should be or could be the role of the President administration, as the whole case is all around the political control?
The presidential administration does not have legal instruments to pressure either an APC or Parliament of Ukraine, but as we see, they do use informal ways to influence on different top high-ranking officials. We most certainly want to emphasize that the administration of the president should stop making such private meetings with the high-ranking officials in order to influence their decisions. It is important that they are doing the stuff that they are obliged by law and not doing anything that is forbidden by law.
There is a news about the particular case when on Friday, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau has opened a criminal case against Ukrainian Prosecutor General Yuriy Lutsenko of illegally enriching himself. To remind, Yuriy Lutsenko is Ukrainian Prosecutor General, but he used to be the head of the faction of the president in the parliament and the closest, one of the closest person to the Ukrainian President Poroshenko. What would be, I know it's not the first case, it's something they had to do, but really give us a bit of context and also of this personality.
Well, according to Ukrainian legislation, first of all, Article 214 of the Criminal Procedural Code, if there is a motion submitted to any agency and to the agency on, for example, like Prosecutor's Office or the National Anti-Corruption Bureau or the Ministry of Internal Affairs, if any person submits a motion that there is a crime done by another person, they have to open a criminal case. They have to start the criminal investigation. It's their obligation under law. And as far as I understand, in this case, NABU has received this information from Mr. Renat Kuzmin about a half a year ago, and they did not start the criminal investigation, so he went to court, and there was a court decision which obliged the National Anti-Corruption Bureau to start this investigation. So it's strictly due to the law, and I do not think that there is any political matters in this issue.
Maxim, thank you. It was Maxim Kostetsky, who is the legal advisor to Transparency International Ukraine, and help us to explain the case of a whistleblower in the Anti-Corruption Prevention Agency, speaking against the leadership of the organization, and generally giving the perspective of what's going on with these issues. Is this fight for something, or is it just fights between the agencies?